In Venezuela, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, was welcomed by the people of the state of Falcon to support his candidacy for the elections to be held on July 28th. In Palestine, the World Health Organization warned about the presence of poliovirus in wastewater throughout the Gaza Strip. And in Bangladesh, over 100 people were killed during student protests since Monday. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the Telesur studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the National Electoral Council presented the guidelines for the voting abroad process ahead of the July 28th presidential elections. The National Electoral Authority explained that the instructions will guarantee the exercise of the free and secret vote of Venezuelans who reside abroad. Authorities also highlighted that the act of voting abroad will be carried out on the manual system modality, where the valid document to exercise the right to vote is the identity card. The entity added that electoral officials that refuse to admit the vote of voters who have the right to vote according to the law will be sanctioned. Also in Venezuela, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, was received by the people of the state of Falcon to support his candidacy for the elections to be held on July 28th. With a great concentration, the inhabitants of the city of Coro reaffirming their popular support for the candidacy of the current Venezuelan president. Likewise, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll thanked the people for their support to defeat the sabotage plans led by the Venezuelan far right against the nation. Maduro also announced that in the city of Coro he started the beginning of the campaign closing offensive towards the victory in the presidential elections of next July 28th. In this context, as part of his electoral campaign, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, was received on Friday by the people of the state of Zulia to accompany his candidacy for the elections of July 28th. With a large mobilization as well, the inhabitants of the municipality of Paraguayapoa expressed their support for the candidacy of the current president in the fight against the blockades imposed by the United States and its European allies. The candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll thanked the people for their support to defeat the actions of the far right and promised to continue working for the welfare of the nation. Maduro also recalled the historic battle of the indigenous communities to defend their lands from the genocidal European colonialism of 500 years ago when they arrived to Venezuelan territory.
500 years ago, colonialism came to all of America. And in this peninsula and in these territories, the people resisted the genocidal colonialism of Europe. They could not eliminate the WHO culture, nor the ANU. I can say to the world that these 1.5 million WHO and these thousands of ANU who preserved their lands, their language, their culture, their identity, their spirituality, are an example for all of America of how a brave people resisted and was capable of transcending history.
On the other hand, the presidential candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll reiterated that the historic violence perpetrated by the European colonialism 500 years ago cannot go back to the Venezuela of the 21st century.
We must feel proud of the history we have lived. We must feel proud of our ancestors. Because that gives you a sense of belonging, roots, spirit, strength. What did colonialism do when it arrived in America? There were 100 million men and women in all the peoples, from north to south. In 50 years they exterminated 80 million, and then enslaved those who survived.
At the end of his electoral campaign, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, led the inauguration of the Paraguay POA aqueduct network and pumping station located in the indigenous Bolivarian municipality of Guajira in the state of Zulia. The president affirmed that despite the sanctions imposed by the United States and its European allies, the drinking water restoration project carried out by the revolution will be functional in the next 15 days. Maduro also called on the Venezuelan people to vote in the presidential elections of next July 28th to continue strengthening the country's basic services, which the far-right plans to privatize if it comes to power. Venezuela's electoral campaign is in the final stretch. Let's see details of how the electoral campaigns are taking place in the final report by our special envoy, Yunus Oner.
The Guajira Peninsula, a region of indigenous communities, Venezuelan President and candidate Nicolás Maduro received from the W.H.O and Añu peoples necklaces symbolizing protection. He asked for the vote of the native peoples.
On July 28th, let's go for more peace, more work, more changes and more transformation from the people, for the people and with the people.
The book of the sociologist and oppositional politician Claudio Fermin gives an account of what he offers as a government plan. He became mayor and for the third time he runs for the presidency. He defends that natural resources should be in the hands of the state.
There is absolutely no need to privatize Petróleos de Venezuela. On the contrary, the privatization of Petróleos de Venezuela could be the death of the oil business.
50-year-old lawyer Antonio Ecari is the leader of the Pencil Party, founded in 2017. Education is the foundation of his campaign, thus advancing, he says, production and employment.
If I win the elections, I will promote what will come as a pact of state between all the public powers. I will promote that the outgoing former president, President Maduro, also be part of that pact of state.
Benjamin Rauseo was a successful humorist. Now a businessman, he declares himself independent. He seeks to reach the presidential Miraflores palace, but if he loses, he will continue with his former work.
I believe that the Venezuelan has the right to listen to the electoral offers, my vision for the country. And on the 28th, the Venezuelans make the decision, and I am going to respect it.
In the final stretch of the Venezuelan campaign, Brazil joins the international watchers. The Southern Giant's Superior Electoral Court, a body that a month ago rejected an invitation, agreed to send representatives to the next elections in July.
In other news, in Peru, social organizations call a general strike and marches to demand the resignation of Dina Boluarte and the dissolution of parliament. During the day, the General Confederation of Peruvian Workers, together with trade and political unions, mobilized from Plaza 2 de Mayo in Lima. The General Secretary of the Confederation explained that they are also carrying out a national popular civic strike to defend the rights of citizens and the popular classes. Likewise, the National Human Rights Coordinator joined the movement as an act of protest against what she described as a corrupt, authoritarian, anti-rights coalition of the government and Congress. And in Nicaragua, thousands of citizens celebrate the 45th anniversary of the triumph of the Sandinista People's Revolution. The Nicaraguan people commemorate the struggle against the Somozas regime with street decorations. In this end, citizens mobilized from the early morning of this Friday through Bolivar Avenue to Chavez with the purpose of witnessing the fireworks in commemoration of the date from the Hugo Chavez traffic circle, while the carriers conducted caravans along the main roads of the capital. In this context, the revolutionary triumph in Nicaragua put an end to the Somocista dictatorship, which remained in power for 45 years under the tutelage of the United States. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at Telesur English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Cuba, the third ordinary legislative session of the National Assembly of People's Power was held on Friday as part of its 10th legislature. With the presence of the first Secretary of the Party and President of the Republic, Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, the Assembly approved the Law of Administrative Procedure, the Law of Migration, and the Law of the System of Honorary Titles and Decorations of the Republic of Cuba. According to the Minister of Justice, Oscar Silvera, the Law of Administrative Procedure constitutes a significant advance in the regulation of administrative law in the country, having as its premise the absolute defense of the rights of Cuban citizens.
The National Assembly, sum and synthesis of the country that we are, voted unanimously almost all its agreements. That provokes not a few criticisms from those who do not know that behind that agreement there are long and intense days of work, debate, and search for consensus, based on the collective interest. And I think it is worth saying it, Cuba is not led by one person, not even by a small group of people. This is the rare dictatorship that the enemies of the revolution will never be able to understand. The dictatorship of the workers, the dictatorship of the people that those of us gathered here represent, by popular election. That is why what we discuss here is a guide, and what we approve is law.
On Thursday, the European Mediterranean Seismological Center reported a 7.3 magnitude tremor shook the mining region of Antofagasta in northern Chile, with no reports of casualties or material damage. According to the EMSC, the seism occurred at a depth of 128 kilometers and it was felt in regions of Bolivia, Peru, and Argentina. However, the probability of damage in Chile is low. Although no immediate damage was reported, the National Disaster Prevention and Response Service stated that it was investigating possible damage to people, disruption of basic services, or infrastructure resulting from this earthquake. In Ecuador, a forest fire affected 120 hectares in the cities of Girón and Santa Isabel in the southeast of that jurisdiction due to the high levels of heat registered in the area. Authorities at the site activated an emergency operations center to address the damage, while the fire brigades of the three cities are trying to control the fire. The Secretariat of Risk Management informed that so far no houses have been affected, but warned that the fire is still active. The governmental entity detailed that during this season, the low humidity level in the atmosphere, the scarce cloudiness, as well as the increase in wind speed and ultraviolet radiation favor the creations of forest fires. The Brazilian government reported that 96% of the fires in the Pantanal biome have been controlled or extinguished, but control teams are still mobilized in the area. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change reported that 56% of the fires have been extinguished, while the remaining 40% are in the process of being controlled and 4% are still being fought. In this sense, the entity warned about the forecast of a heat wave with low humidity starting next weekend, increasing the risk of new fires. In China, floods caused by rains leave at least 5 people dead and 8 missing in the center of the country. In Baoji City, Shaanxi province, the rains caused floods, landslides, damage to infrastructure, among other effects. Rural roads, as well as 21 brigades, were affected by flooding in several localities. Rescue teams evacuated more than 7,800 people and managed to restore traffic, communications, and power supply. In other news, the U.S. multinational technology corporation Microsoft presented a massive failure which caused a worldwide computer system crash. Several airports, media outlets, banks, and hospitals around the world have had to interrupt their operations as the company assured that some systems could continue to experience problems. The flaw was caused by a bug in the CrowdStrike security system update, which caused a critical error in the operation of Windows operating system. The failure generated delays in scheduled flights of several airlines, with incidents in Australia, Hong Kong, India, and Europe. Likewise, in the United States, all flights of several major airlines were affected due to the technical problem. From Spanish airports, and air navigation warned that an incident in the computer system was producing alterations in the systems and in the airports of the network in the whole Iberian country. Gradually, the companies reported that they have been recovering some of their systems. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly, share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Found your break, don't go away. Welcome back. Palestine, the World Health Organization warned about the presence of poliovirus in wastewater throughout the Gaza Strip. According to the international agency, the virus is present in sewage samples collected in June from 6 different locations of Han Yunis and Deir al-Balah. The World Health Organization is working with local health authorities, the United Nations Children's Fund and the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees to assess the extent of the spread. This work will help determine the measures needed to stop any further outbreaks, including immediate vaccination campaigns. Israeli occupation forces committed 4 new massacres against Palestinian families in the Gaza Strip during the last 24 hours. Health authorities reported at least 37 people killed and 54 others wounded. Authorities warned that Tel Aviv forces prevent the entry of rescue teams in the attacked areas, hindering the care of the wounded and the recovery of the dead bodies. They also detailed that several corpses are trapped under the rubble or scattered on the roads due to the Israeli onslaught. According to official data, the number of Palestinians killed since October 2023 amounts to 38,919, while 89,622 people were wounded, mostly children and women. On Thursday in Israel, hundreds of citizens marched in Jerusalem to demand measures from Benjamin Netanyahu's government to guarantee the end of the offensive in the Gaza Strip and the return of Israeli prisoners. Demonstrations took place in the vicinity of the residence of the Israeli Prime Minister, whom protesters accused of being the main responsible for the continuation of the conflict in Gaza. This way, demonstrators demand that Netanyahu reaches an agreement with the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, for the liberation of Israelis held in Palestinian territory. This comes after the head of government provoked the anger of citizens by stating that the hostages are suffering but not dying.
Personally, I'm protesting to end this war, to end the suffering of our soldiers, and to end the suffering of the Gazan people.
In Bangladesh, over 100 people were killed during student protests since Monday. The government announced a curfew, deployed security forces, and cut off a large part of the country's internet and telephone connections in an attempt to regain control of the country. Students protested in rejection of the current quota system, favoring a group of people who support the Prime Minister. Hospital sources confirmed that the death toll was 105. Among them are security agents and civilians. The UN High Commissioner condemned the repression in Dhaka. And in Kenya, the High Court overturns the ban on protests in and around the Nairobi Financial District, a decision taken previously by the country's acting Inspector General. The police order to ban the demonstrations was taken under the pretext of guaranteeing public security after alleged attempts of criminal attacks. The National Human Rights Commission detailed in a report that after days of protests, at least 53 people died, another 575 were injured, and more than 1,200 were detained. President William Ruto, after the pressure of protests against his government, validated the arguments of demonstrators and invited them to hold a dialogue. The Nigerian army neutralized terrorist groups in the Tillaberi region in the northwest of the country. The Ministry of Defense stated that they captured another 30 members of armed groups in 3 regions bordering Mali and Burkina Faso. The Security Department said that they increased the extension of the army deployment in this border zone due to the recent escapes from maximum security prisons of Kutu Kale, which caused civilian death in Tillaberi. They stressed that most of the escaped prisoners are members of terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and the self-proclaimed Islamic State, representing a threat against military personnel and the civilian population. And in India, a passenger train derailed nearby the Gonda town, triggering at least 2 deaths and some 31 injured. The incident occurred as the train was covering the route between the cities of Dibrugarh and Chandigarh in northern India. In the aftermath of the accident, the Ministry of Railways ordered to pursue a high-level inquiry into its causes and indicated the families of fatal victims and the injured will receive compensation. Passengers who were unharmed were transferred by bus to the nearest town, from where a special train was waiting to take them to their original destination. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.